Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk. Our special guest today is Kani Kundalini, okay, and today we will be talking about neuroscience, the three kingdoms, and off grid living. So, for my special guest, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is really cool, honestly. I'm excited, really. And thank you for posting it and allowing people who have things in their head to be spoken out loud on a platform. So I'll start with the three kingdoms, basically, and I'll start with the first one. Now, usually when kingdoms are spoken about, it's just two that are mentioned, which is plants and animals. And the grandparents, the creators, or the first ones of it all, aren't really spoken about, which is funga or fungus or fungi or the mycelium. I'll never forget the first time I like this on the fact that fungi isn't really paid attention to. There was this meme, and it was this guy, and he was like hugging a dog, and there's a cat in the back, and the cat was like really serious looking, and the guy the words over the guy was humans, and then the dog was how plants help the world, and then the cat was fungi, which literally is the reason for all of life. And something that's really beautiful about the fungi kingdom is they help us so much with so many things. Like, for example, reishi mushrooms is known as like the mushroom of immortality, and Tibetan monks have used it, and it's great for stress and sleeping. And then lion's mane is good for our brain, which is interesting because mane rhymes with brain. And then there's psilocybin, which everyone knows what that does. Like that's the trippy shrooms, and not only what they do for us on a medicinal sense, but even just watching what they do, even when we don't touch them. Like they're in charge of basically cleaning up the earth, like cleaning up decomposing bodies and waste and oil spills and all. And yeah, I just think it's really beautiful how that works. I recently learned that mycelium, you could compare it to the root of a tree, but not really, in the sense of what we see are trees, but they have an entire like root system. And for us, what we see are mushrooms, which is like the kind of like the flower or the fruit, but not really. Um, for the mycelium. And another way that they show how ancient they are is the fauna, which is animals. Take one path at a time when it comes to searching for what food we want to eat, or just how we walk our path. Though the way that mycelium moves is they will move in all directions, and they'll keep track of like what path leads to nourishment, and then the paths that lead to nothing, they'll just like bring it back to the center and then like feed it towards the other paths. And something that happened in ancient times was when colonizers and all those people that just forced their ways on others, they basically took away old practices that involved mushrooms and like made it illegal, and like shunned people or made it seem evil. That kind of like took away a lot of the perspective or connection to mycelium and mushroom and fungi. And it's just really beautiful to see the many different practices and rituals and truths that we used to have that we're coming back to. So yeah, that's the first kingdom.
As far as using mushrooms in general, I was gonna ask how do you use them to heal you per se, or how have you used them in the past?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I can say the number one mushroom that I've used so far was psilocybin mushrooms. I had the honor to know someone for 2 years who consistently had them. So I often would microdose or do large trips. And one thing I noticed, because before I took a lot of LSD, but when I took mushrooms, I noticed it was a different kind of trip. Like I was less in control. Like it was as if the mycelium or the fungi would like ground itself into my body and would like I was no longer processing my thoughts through my own eyes, but I was seeing like the fungi kingdom as well. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I had trips where I was crying and like as I was crying I was hearing my thoughts and I was like happy. Like I was happy to release it. So that helped me like see crying through a different perspective. It opens my eyes to so many things. Another thing that pops up in my mind as I talk about this, my recent trip, this was months ago, um, my boyfriend and I were looking at paintings of hell during a trip, and it's called paintings of hell, but one thing I noticed was it was really paintings of death, and it was like people's interpretations of dying and what death includes. So, for example, it was like colors of black, and like it was downwards motion, and there was like there was one painting where it was like a lot of butts and like things coming out of it. And in my head I'm like, okay, like I one thing I heard was whenever we pass away, like our waste gets released. So I was like, this might be symbolism for that. And one thing I noticed with fungi is it brings a very neutral perspective, so it's easy to see things without thinking of it as like very taboo or abstract, but like, yeah, that's life. I haven't tripped in a while, but very recently I got a reishi extraction. Usually things are turned into tinctures, but I noticed that with mushrooms, they're called extractions. And when it comes to reishi, something I learned as well, I didn't make this myself, I bought it. But I'm slowly learning how to create them or how to work with them myself. But when it comes to reishi mushrooms, the best thing to do is to extract it with alcohol, I learned. And you can even use hot water and blend the two solutions together. I noticed since taking the reishi mushrooms, like my body doesn't feel the emotions that my mind goes through. Because one thing I'll never put on a show about is like, oh, I took this and my life's better, because everything's like one day at a time. One thing I do notice so far is like I'll have thoughts that are like, all over the place, but it's not in my body. Like my heart won't start pacing or I won't like feel anxiety or anything like that. Um, and yeah, at first it tasted like really strong. Now it just tastes like a really bitter, weird chocolate kind of taste. Yeah, I've just been like feeling more calm, more centered, and it's easier for me to express what's on my mind and not really like hold back or hesitate or think like, nah, I'll save that thought for another time, or like, yeah, I don't really want to say that or stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I'm working with them so far. But there's gonna be a lot more in the future. So I'm excited. Very
Yeah,
excited.
of course. So wait, so are you saying that you felt more in control on LSD or psilocybin?
So LSD, I had a choice of my trip. Like I had a choice of what I wanted to face and what I wanted to do and stuff like that. Meanwhile, like fungi, and then this is another way that fungi showed me that they're super ancient. Fungi is just like, nah, this is what I want you to look at. Like you're gonna look at this. Like you're not gonna choose. You're gonna look at this. So it's very humbling. It's more humbling I can say.
In terms of like control in a different way, how I thought you meant was I feel like on psilocybin, I am more able to function in the world, and on LSD, I'm like a child more like.
Mm,
So, yeah, I feel like on psilocybin, I have more control. But in the sense that you're talking about, I feel like with psychedelics in general, I always get that this is what is at the forefront of what I want you to, pay attention to and not put in the back of your mind.
for sure. I'm gonna be honest with you. I love psychedelics, and a song just came to my mind. That Lauryn Hill Nana song, "If I Ruled the World." Honestly, if I ruled the world, I'd make everyone take psychedelics because, like, you know, they are. It's so freaking amazing. It is so life changing. I actually have a recommendation for everyone that listens to this, and you as well. It's a documentary, very life changing, but it's called Neurons to Nirvana, and it's so freaking good because, like, it's like a blend of scientists talking and then people who just like tripped and people who just had shamanic experiences. So it's a balance of hearing people talk scientifically as well as people who, speak about it in a more personal sense. And it stood out to me because there was one part where this neuroscientist basically explained why psychedelics feel the way they feel for us. So there's certain neurons in our brain, when we go to sleep, they turn on, and then there's other ones that when we wake up, they turn on, or when we're awake. And when we take psychedelics, the neurons that turn on when we go to sleep, they stay on even when we're awake. And then the ones that like only turn on when we're awake, they just stay there. So because like the neurons that normally turn on when we're asleep is up, it's as if we're in a dreamy sleep state, but we're not. But when we're sleeping, we're not really in the fight or flight sense. And when I take psychedelics, I'm very, very relaxed. Like, I'm out of the autopilot defensive mode, like, immediately. I'll forever love that psychedelics exists.
I feel like the biggest reason why I love psychedelics is because while like you might, smoke or drink and that might get your like numb you or get your mind off of things that you need to be, reflecting on, psychedelics is like, hey, no, this is what you're going to focus on. This is what's coming to the forefront and this is what you need to deal with. And I feel like a lot of that's kind of where bad trips kind of come from because some people might not be called to or might not like the idea of doing the work and self-reflecting, but I love psilocybin so much just because I feel like it's like a guide, and as far as your spiritual journey and just that inner work.
Exactly, exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up. I can genuinely say I've never had a bad trip ever. Like, there was one time where I was on acid, and it was my first time taking it out in public. I was at a rave and I left early because I was like, I do not need to be here. But it wasn't bad. It was just like, I'll never do this again. The thing is about psychedelics is the answer to psychedelics is literally in the first few letters, and it's like psyche. Like, it's literally um, allies that we take, and it like brings our mind into a projection. And we're already in a projection of our mind, though psychedelics emphasizes it even more. And yeah, I completely agree with you. Just like it just holds her head and it's just like, hey, look, like, look at this. And it's very beautiful that it exists, honestly. It pushed me to, or they pushed me to do so many things, and realize so many things, and have helped me um, gain the confidence to live, just live longer, and experience more, and create more and express more. And I remember there was time I was this one time I was on acid. I was still 18, actually. Yeah, I was still 18. And I was very indecisive. There's moments where I'm indecisive now. It happens sometimes, but I was very indecisive at that point in my life. I remember I was tripping and I was just sitting in my sister's room at the time, and I was looking around and I noticed that I was seeing like a manifestation of decisions I made that wasn't long lasting. Like, for example, I was planning on being nomadic in California for a while, but it became very overwhelming. And because that wasn't the original plan, I was in a room that was filled with boxes, and it just, you know, I wasn't meant to be there. So little things like that, it brings up symbolism and just makes things very in our face, and it's really beautiful.
Which
Very,
I love.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
I
for sure.
love, because it's kind of like it's like your ancestor, like, hey, shaking their finger at you, like, hey, pay attention to this. Like, this is serious. This is something you need to be paying attention to. And I just love that.
Yes,
I could
yes,
also say that I've never had a bad trip either. There was one time where I felt like it was headed towards a bad trip, but and that was only because I consumed the psilocybin and I felt like, well, I feel like this anytime I trip, the ongoing, like the onset of my trips are always very intense. And
yeah.
I don't know why this one was just super intense. I feel like it was probably the strain, but I just noticed myself becoming scared because I didn't know, like, okay, this might be too intense of a trip for me. And then I had those thoughts and it was kind of leading towards a bad trip. And then I was just like, okay, wait, let me just surrender to this trip. And as soon as I said that, I started busting out laughing. And it was just turned out to be the best trip ever. And so I feel like a lot of bad I can't speak for anyone, but personally for me, I know that I noticed that a bad trip that was about to happen was just because I was resisting the trip more so
Mhm.
than surrendering to it.
That's beautiful, man. That is so beautiful. And I love that you say this because the older kingdoms, that's consistently their message is just surrender, surrender, surrender. And something that's actually beautiful about the older kingdoms is they move less than we do, but they're still very alive at the same time. And I'm currently reading this book that's really amazing. It's called Thus Spoke the Plant. There's this scientist, her name's Monica Gagliano. She used to study fishes, and she had to study like fishes giving birth and how they moved and grew and developed. But each time she was done studying the fish, she had to kill it or kill them. And the last time she was about to do it, she noticed that the fishes kind of sensed what she was about to do. And that was the last straw for her. And having dreams about this particular tree, and this man kept showing up as well, and they turned out to be in Peru. So she goes to Peru and she finds the village, and there's this, what they do is called dieta, so it's basically like they consume nothing but that plant for a while, and the plant or the tree like gave her a dream, and in the dream was like flashes of red, and that was the plant's way of telling her like that it was a blood cleanser. And in the dream it said like we're all connected by blood. And something else that was really beautiful that I've read so far is there's this plant, has plenty of names. Like it's called mimosa, it's called the sensitive plant, the moving plant. But it's basically the plant that when we touch it with our fingertips, like it curls up really cute.
Hmm.
She did a test with them where she put them on this like leverage and she kept dropping them, and she tested out different ones. Like some of them were in high level of lights and some were in a low level of lights. And after a while, the mimosas stopped closing their leaves because they realized or they remembered what was going to happen. And she put them to the side for a couple of days, and then she did it again, and they still didn't close their leaves. Like they still remembered what was going to happen. Even when she switched the low light plants to the highlight room and the highlight plants to the low light room. And this proved that plants have memories, they have thoughts, even though they don't have a neurosystem or a nervous system or a brain, and that there's a high similarity, even though they're not built like us in a sense, quote unquote. Yeah, I just think it's really beautiful what happens when we surrender and also remember as well. It's really cool thinking of fungi and flora in the they're older than us sense, because then there comes this appreciation and gratitude and trust in the fact that no matter what's going on in the fauna kingdom, our specific one, because even like the other faunas, like the other animals, they're tuned into their own like clock or biology. But our little weird drama, like it's little, it's small, because thinking of how ancient mushrooms are and how much shit has happened on this planet, is just like, okay, they may be smaller and they're not as big as hills. The fact that they're still like really, really old mushrooms and really old trees, despite all the civilizations, like there's some sense of immortality here and some sense of like long lasting effect here. And time again, I like to think about the older two kingdoms and ground myself in that immortality and that longevity of life living.
It's funny that you bring up the sensitive plant because I just got the opportunity to experience what you were talking about. I recently went to the botanical gardens, and there were so many of them there, and it's just so interesting to see, like when you actually touch it, how they just curl up. Yeah, very interesting plant.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. Oh my
Yeah, it
god.
was really cool. It was very cool. But I wanted to ask, when did you like? Have you always had this connection to nature, or did it somewhere? When did it begin?
That's actually a very good question. So I would say it grew as I got older. I've always loved being outside. I've always loved being in nature. I would say like the first thing in nature I fell in love with was the moon. Um,
Hmm.
my grandma transitioning when I was 3, like I always felt her in the sky, so I would just always be looking at the sky. Looking at trees and looking outside just always calmed me when I was younger. Like I would just always be looking outside of windows. It just always felt like, I don't know, throughout my life it always felt like the like drama or like weird human experiences would always happen inside of buildings. As a child I was always playing out. Well, I had a balance of like watching TV, like watching SpongeBob and playing video games, but then I was also like skateboarding and scootering and swimming in the pool. And I would say what was very grounding for me as far as being connected to nature and slow living was just like where I come from as far as my bloodline. Um, I was born, within the borders of USA or whatever it's labeled as, but my family is from Jamaica, and when I was little, I used to go there often. And something that stood out to me the most, I don't remember all the trips because I was really young for some of them, but every time I went to my Auntie Vita's place, like something I always loved was, instead of, the washing machine and dryer, we would wash things by hand and like hang it up on the clothesline, and just different stuff like that always like gave me a connection to, living beyond modern way of living. And I remember once I graduated from high school, like I told myself like last week of high school, I'm like deprogramming and reprogramming hardcore. And I just remember like I went super hard that freaking summer, like hiking, um, being outside all the time, lots of acid tripping, climbing trees. Just summer 2017, I full fledged just went outside, just went out like super hardcore. Even before I graduated, a little bit before then, I would go to parks and like um, go to picnics and different stuff like that. But when I fully dove in there, I would say when I was 18. So, thinking about fauna, the last kingdom, and our nervous system and neuroscience, something that stands out to me about neuroscience is a central nervous system, which is our brain and our spine, which is in the shape of a snake, basically. And it moves like yin yang with our body. So, our central nervous system sends messages to our body, and then our body like picks up on senses and sends it back to our central nervous system, and it just talks on and on and on like it's doing it right now. I've been noticing a lot that the nervous system is being emphasized right now, which is really great, though it's being emphasized, but the why isn't being emphasized right now. And it's like, why is our nervous system important? I feel like our nervous system is basically our roots. It looks like roots in itself. It literally controls everything. Our nervous system is in charge of the fight or flight response. It's in charge of autopilot. It's in charge of how we respond to certain sights and tastes and what we hear and smell and all of that. I think it's really amazing that there's literally a section of flora or plants called nervines. And basically, when it comes to herbalism, there's different energetic pathways that different collections of plants have. And those energetic pathways are the reasons that, for example, when we take ginger, it helps with sore throats, or like um, how peppermint helps with nausea and stuff like that, is because of the energetic pathways that they contain. And even mushrooms assist as well, because like the reishi mushroom is good for stress, so that's even helping the nervous system as well. And I do think neuroscience is something that's very important as far as like learning about health and about our journeys as like souls and these like flesh bodies navigating through this place, because I notice it's a very grounded way of looking at spirituality, like certain things that I've seen in like spiritual books or certain like spiritual people say. Neuroscience will say it in a very straight to the point kind of way and make it very clear. And also, how to balance trauma, or the reasons why it's important to focus on our thoughts or certain experiences that we have and what neurotransmitters gets released. I do notice that out of literally everything, it always ties back to the nervous system. Like there's even a Sanskrit word called samskara, which means like an energetic wheel or energetic blockage. And every time we experience something that causes trauma, or like some sort of emotional imprint, a samskara gets created. And the longer we hold on to it, every time we experience a trigger, the reason why we snap back into that place is because of the energetic blockage. And we can look at it that way. But even tying it to neuroscience, that's literally transmitters getting triggered in the brain and making and like sending to our bodies through our central nervous system, and then we respond in certain ways. So it's just really cool. studying different things in different places, but the same message gets emphasized over and over again. And, you know, fauna, us being like the baby kingdom or like the last kingdom, we're literally just learning, like you said earlier, to just surrender and let go of control and to flow more and to be more like water and to coexist and be, which is really amazing. Very, very amazing.
Have you read the book called The Body Keeps the Score?
The body keeps the score. Is it a blue book?
It is a blue book.
And it's about trauma, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have the PDF in my phone. My
Okay,
friend Nami sent it to me. Shout out to Nami. She sent it to me. I haven't
you
started reading
should
it yet.
you should get on that because everything that you're talking about is pretty much what that book is talking like speaks on and everything. It goes into like the whole scientific side of, even though we go through things and we think that we have released them and healed them, our body still holds on to that, and that's why sometimes we react in ways that confuses us even sometimes. So I feel like you'd really like that book.
I think I will too. Actually, I love that. I love learning about that. It is so funny. It's so funny because freaking psilocybin. I'll never forget this trip. Psilocybin showed me in two different ways. Actually, two different trips. It showed me that each action we take literally has a huge effect on things. I'll start with the first trip I had. I was at my friend Pinky's house and she made mushroom tea. And I just remember sitting down and all of a sudden a string of white light was coming out the back of my head and it was connected to my sister and then my mom and then my grandma and then like it went all the way back and there's women that I couldn't even see their faces but I knew that they were connected to me. Literally every time I took a breath, had a thought, did anything, like light would travel through it and like connect to each of these people. Like I could blink and it would just move through the thread of light. The second thing that psilocybin showed me, this was a year later. I was microdosing this time. It wasn't even a lot. And all of a sudden, like a projection came out of the side of my head and I saw the DNA helix moving. And then a voice was just like, yeah, you're changing your DNA each second. I say that to say I'm very grateful for people who bring things like neuroscience and, you know, the book Keeping Score to us because it just emphasizes like the importance of each second and like how every moment is in effect and sometimes it's not even like from us and not to take it away from being our responsibility but emphasizing even more that it's our responsibility to change it within our DNA and within our genetics. So it's really amazing.
Very there. The whole mycelium network is just so interesting to me. So yeah, I'm definitely appreciate that.
Shout out to the mycelium, man. Shout out to them. I've been doing this thing lately where no matter where I am, I'll like think about mycelium and how there's a probability that they're underneath like the pavements on roads or like sidewalks and stuff like that. Like I like visualizing big they are and how much they branch out. So even when so many things are on top, they're still like what reigns supreme.
Definitely. They're very ancient. So yeah, like they've outlived a lot of things. And I
Mhm.
feel like even after us, it'll outlive us.
Yeah,
So yeah.
exactly, exactly. They just they just clean us up anyway. They're just like, all right, it's great having you.
Right. On to the next.
Big facts, big facts.
Do you currently live off grid or is this something that you're pushing towards?
I'm I'm pushing towards it, but I'm pushing towards it in my own way. I could say I'm figuring out what that means for me exactly. I almost lived off grid before, but because life gives us what we need and not what we want, it didn't work out. I wasn't meant to be in a desert in California, so
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't meant to be with the guy I was with at the time. So I'm definitely grateful that that didn't work out. But something that's standing out to me is the fact that while we're going back to ancient ways, we're also in the future. We're also in Age of Aquarius. While we're going back to, ancient practices, technology is helping us learn these ancient practices, and technology is here at the same time. I am seeing like a sense of balance when it comes to this stuff. I personally don't like the term off grid. I really don't, because it existed before the grid, and I just feel like saying off grid just like makes it seem like it's something that's happening afterward. I'm still trying to find like I guess sustainable living helps me the most as far as like off grid. But I'll use off grid because that's like the most used term. But tying everything together as far as neuroscience, the three kingdoms, and off grid living. If our central nervous system is feeding our body and our body is taking in senses and going to our central nervous system, and if plants and fungi remind us to like slow down and calm down and things like that. The reason why off-grid living is the way that it is because we don't have to put so much effort just to calm down or just to get out of, being tense or responding in a certain way or existing in a certain way. Something that I notice happens is like there will be different like there will be retreats and stuff that cost a lot of money, and it's very beautiful that they exist and they give people a chance to like have a moment to relax and to cleanse or do whatever the retreat provides. Though that's a very short term, because then after the retreat it's like, okay, back to normal living. People that have retreats to fund their land and what they're doing, a lot of it isn't that. A lot of it is like white people just profiting off of ancient knowledge and indigenous medicines and wisdom, and the money that's going towards that can literally go towards like investing in land, or at least like a cabin somewhere, or just saving up while figuring out what to do. I was recently having a conversation with this woman named Jalen, and there's a lot of people who have taken the path of being off grid, but every one of their paths are so different. Like, there's not, like, as much as it seems like a step 1, step 2 kind of thing, it's not really that. There's some people who live off grid and their friends gave them land or family. There's other people where they lived off grid in a community, but then they found like a plot of land nearby and just decided to live by themselves. Like, there's just, and then there's some people who have friends and they were able to do that. And then there's some people that just happen to save up. So many different things. One thing I can say as far as like what I'm seeing for myself personally, especially for a person who's like in my 20s and really young, am refusing to be pressured by the like illusions of, oh, I have to rush or I need to scramble and stuff like that. Taking it one day at a time is better than not doing anything at all. It can start from doing things such as, one way of living off grid, no matter where you are, is growing your own food. You can literally do that anywhere as long as you have like a balcony or a window or something. And there's even like herbs that you can grow in your kitchen and stuff like that. Because the whole like cold turkey thing, that's not always what it is. For example, we'll search off grid and we'll see all these like white people and they're just like, yeah, so my friend just gave me this place, and it kind of like makes it seem very far-fetched. But there's just there's just so many options. And for example, farmers markets, even if you aren't growing food yet, there's people that are growing their own food all the time and they're right there. And even going on Eventbrite and searching like farmer gardens, boom, then you see people who are nearby and you volunteer there and you get free food from that. And one thing I noticed about off grid is it's a mindset first before it flourishes out into life. And it just takes caring about it and seeing ways that you can bring it into your life right now. Um, and the world's changing every day too. And I used to think that when I was a lot younger, of just like, oh, the most balanced way of living is in a forest or something like that. But something that completely opened my eyes was this year in February. I went to my friend Venus's place. She lives in a little bit outside of Durham in North Carolina. And it was the country, but it wasn't super off grid. Like you could drive like 30 or 20 minutes and you'll be in town. Something that stood out to me was yes, they used well water. Yes, they had chickens and had their own eggs. Yes, there was a huge backyard and all of that. But if they didn't tell you it was well water, you wouldn't have known because the kitchen looked like any other person's kitchen and different stuff like that. And, everything was wood. The walls were wood. The floor was wood and stuff like that. One thing that was really cool is the whole family lived on the block, but it still just looked like regular houses at the same time. And it opened my eyes to think like, wow, okay, like it doesn't have to be like this huge, like this kind of way and that kind of way. It's literally like different ways of existing. And that's why I brought up Age of Aquarius. We're moving into ancient ways, but now we have technology. Because even people who lived off grid and built their tiny homes and their houses and such, they learn most of the stuff off of YouTube or off of
Mhm.
looking online. Yeah, it's just really beautiful how we all have our own path. But the number one goal, really, I see with all of it is our nervous system and getting out of the fight or flight. And I feel like the number one reason why it's important to get out of our fight or flight, I feel like it has a huge effect on when our time comes to transition. Because I feel like if we're tense or if we're in a huge like control or a huge grip kind of thing, it has an effect on that.
Yeah, I like that you touched on the retreats because I also recently had a conversation with a friend and they also touched on the fact that the retreats are nice, but they are definitely just being used to profit off of other people's spiritual experiences and what they're after, but not really giving or teaching ways to continue on with what they're doing there after the retreats.
Hmm.
It's kind of just like not for show, but kind of. um, and I also like the fact that you touched on growing food because I'm also interested in the whole sustainable living thing, and I also grow my own food. And my biggest thing with my brand is just also letting people know that no matter where you are, no matter where you live, you can and you are able to grow your off food.
Hmm.
Even off grid mean for you in your own words? Like, what does it look like for you?
Yeah. So, what it looks like for me is when I need something, going to the community, going to friends, going to family, not thinking like, oh, I need a corporation to do this or I need a company to do that. Like, once I'm in a place where 100% literally everything I'm doing is from someone I know or from someone that someone I know knows, then I'll feel off grid, really. I would say, what does that look like more specifically? Swapping clothes instead of going to stores. Like right now, I only go to thrift stores, but going even further and trading clothes instead of, buying clothes. Another thing that comes to mind is really trading anything too. Growing food as well. That's always important. And something that I recently applied for, there's something out here called, because I'm in the DMV, I'm in Virginia area, but in DC and Maryland area, there is something called DC Home Apothecary. And in the application, they asked, um, what kind of different things I wanted to do. And I mentioned like pop-ups, and they also do this thing where they hand out herbal kits and like herbal first aids and different stuff like that. I consider that to be off grid, because instead of someone going to the store for Neosporin and a band-aid, they can make some type of herbal salve or something like that. So thinking of off grid as a mindset and as a lifestyle and sustainability, I would just say sustainable goes hand in hand with community, definitely. And something I wanted to do when I was 20, life happens, but I'm grateful because I'm going to do it, but in a different way. I used to live in Atlanta. There was a lot of beautiful people out there. And I was planning different events. I was going to have one where it was going to be for women and we all made reusable menstrual pads. And then another one where there was another woman I met and she reused certain materials such as old jeans and stuff to make journals. That's kind of off grid and sustainable, because rather than spending, tons of money and throwing away like pounds and pounds of pads, then you have reusable pads. And not only is it keeping you from throwing away lots of waste, but they don't have any dyes and stuff like that. I noticed that whenever I have worn pads that has a scent on them, it does not feel good. It does not feel good at all. Like, at all. Definitely can feel the difference between when pads have chemicals on them and when they don't. Yeah, that's the different ways I see sustainability is the moment that I don't have to go to a company or corporation for anything at all.
I feel like that is facts, like sustainability is community. And also,
Mm-hmm.
I like that you touched on like trading, because a lot of my friends and I who are also interested in the whole quote unquote off grid living, we are trying to bring the bartering system back, because I don't know, I just feel like that is just what has been working the most for me even this year. Is I have things to offer and other people have things to offer, and we can trade our goods and services versus always having to spend money.
That is freaking awesome. And shout out to you and your friends. Your friends sound really great. That's something else that I'm learning this year too, is getting out of the escapist mindset I used to have that ties into when I was little, because I daydreamed a lot and like tuned out of reality. But you know, there's a lot of perspectives on America. Some people spell it with the three Ks and sees it a certain way. But it's ironic because as there's that perspective, simultaneously, it's the perspective of, this is the oldest land, this is Egypt, all that stuff. There's a lot of things that happens here, but at the same time, we can build our own way of existing within it. And I'm completely with you on the bartering and stuff like that. Like, yeah, money and buying stuff exists. However, the more people that are bartering and trading, that's more energy going towards that. Something I'm doing right now that kind of creeps me out, because I've never had a job where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. I tell my boyfriend all the time, I'm just like, yo, I love my job and it's scary for me. But I work at farmers markets now. There's this adorable Austrian couple, and they came from Austria, and they basically hand make strudels, and all their ingredients are from, local farms and stuff. And something I notice at farmers markets is people will trade anything for a strudel, like all the vendors. And even if they don't want a strudel. Like, some people will just hand things out for free. Like, this one dude, he was just going out around giving out his popcorn. It was my first time having Ethiopian popcorn because he put Berber spice on it. And I got something I'm so hype about. The last time I was there, or at a farmer's market, was Friday. There's this woman whose tent is gonna be beside mine every Friday, and she's from Salvador. And basically, she sells cacao, coffee, and honey that her family has on their farm in Salvador. And she gave me a whole free bag of cacao. And it's just like experiencing that kind of stuff in person and like meeting these different people. It's just like, wow, like I didn't have to like go in my wallet and like pay for this, you know? And this is medicinal. Like, this is freaking cacao. Like, that's for the heart chakra. It's very amazing seeing like bartering like every day in a sense. Completely with you on that. I fully support, and I'd love to be a part of that actually. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just great. Like just like how you said, you don't have to pull out your wallet and pay for things, and how happy people are to trade things with you. And my number one thing is knowing where it came from. I know this person who gave this, or who grew this food personally, or who made this personally, and that's where I'm headed with everything, you know.
I'm glad you said I know where it came from personally. It just brought a memory actually. So there's this book called Omnivore's Dilemma. I read it at first when I was 14. I had an AP geography class in high school, and we had to buy the book ourselves. We only read one freaking chapter of it. And I've always had an old lady way of thinking. So I was 14 and I was just like, I'm not about to pay 17 freaking dollars for a book and not read it. So I finished reading it myself, and that book, it touched on the way supermarkets are built. Like, I didn't know that all the fresh produce and meats were on the outside and all the processed food were on the inside until I read it. I didn't know so many things were made out of corn, like walls and cart oils and corn syrup, and just there's so many things are made out of corn. The one thing that stood out to me was he divided the book into different sections. He started out with industrial, where he went to different slaughterhouses. Like, he basically went to where things came from. So he started out with different slaughterhouses, sources of where things are in supermarkets. The second one, he messaged this farmer who basically like had his own farm, cut his own meat. Well, he wasn't allowed to cut cows because at the time, like, that was against government regulations for some odd reason. Like, he can cut chickens, but he couldn't cut his own cow. So something funny was the author messaged him if he can like ship his meat, and the farmer said no because that involved like fossil fuel, and he's against that. He was like, but you're welcome to come to my farm. It was something very beautiful about this farmer. The farm that he lived on, his dad got it, but his dad didn't live long enough or have enough time to basically replenish the land, because when he bought the land, the soil wasn't good enough to grow food on and stuff like that. But something his son did, which is really amazing, was he connected everything to each other. Like, for example, the cows would eat the grass. Then the cows would poop on the grass. He'd move the cows, let it sit for a little bit, and then the chickens would like feed on the bugs that would get on the cow's poop and stuff like that. And it was just like he created a whole system. And after a while, as he was telling the author, it helped the land flourish and build. Another thing that stood out was literally the only thing the family went to the store for was paper towels. And she said the wife was joking that like they'll really level up if the farmer and his sons like learn how to process trees into paper towels and stuff like that. That was really cool. And then the last part of the book was hunting and gathering. So the author foraged mushrooms, and a friend of his told him about a guy who went hunting for pigs or hogs. So the first time he tried hunting, it didn't work out. He like hesitated too much and ended up like not killing the pig. But the second time he got to, and the guy he went with hung the pig upside down. But something he did that was very interesting was, as he was cutting the pig into different pieces, he was smoking a cigar. And what the cigar smoke was doing was keeping the flies away from flying on the pig and stuff like that. I also learned in the book, because he made his own bread, that the way to capture yeast for bread is from the air, is like from different places in the air. And connecting that to mushrooms again, every second we're technically inhaling mushrooms. Spores are everywhere, like mushrooms spray spores and stuff like that. And it makes sense now in that book why that guy was able to capture yeast in thin air. But yeah, Omnivore's Dilemma is definitely, and it's available in PDF too, definitely great for as far as like a story of someone looking at labels and things like that and tracing it to the source and like seeing what they really do there and stuff like that. It's very cool. Very cool.
I'm definitely going to check out everything. I wrote down everything that you recommended. So, yeah, definitely going to check out all the recommendations that you put in this episode. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you. Seriously. Seriously, you're awesome, man. For real.
Thank you. Thank you. You are awesome. You're very knowledgeable, and I also appreciate knowledgeable folks.
Another thing I wanted to add is basically just emphasizing that I enjoy talking to people who are like-minded. So if anyone ever wants to reach out and talk to me, like feel free, because the more of us that are focused on these kinds of things, the better. The kind of stuff that we're doing and we're focused on, it's not a one man band, it's not a one person kind of thing. So yeah, I would say like all the souls who are genuinely interested, like I'm here and like let's get it for real. Yeah.
Definitely. I second that. I second that. So, since there is nothing else to add, I do have some closing cues that I have for all of my guests.
Woo.
So, the first one is, what inspires you the most?
What inspires me the most? Okay. What wow, that's really great. Honestly, a lot. The most. Wow. I would say what inspires me the most is change. And the reason why that inspires me is because, like, no matter what's going on or no matter what I focus on, I know that change can always happen. I can always change. And what's in front of me isn't permanent. And it brings a sense of emphasis on seeing what's important and letting go of what's not. Something else that inspires me is myself as a child, because everything I wanted then is the reason why I am the way I am now. Something else that inspires me is forever mushrooms and plants, forever, 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 forever. And the ocean and tasty food and beautiful music and amazing people, amazing conversations. And also love. I don't mean to sound all like hippy dippy and stuff, but love is a very, very inspiring feeling and energy and experience to have. So, yeah, that's what I can think of as far as inspiring.
That was a great response. How do you recharge?
Oh man, naps for real. Naps, kombucha, this reishi freaking tincture extract. Dancing helps me recharge. Mind stimulation. So many things can stimulate my mind, whether it's a book or a new song or trap music or exercising, reaching out to friends. What it will always be recharging is sitting under a freaking tree and not talking. And also, not talking at all helps me recharge. Yeah, I recharge in a
I
lot of
second the not
ways.
talking.
Yeah.
I second the not talking. I definitely second that. What do you want to leave this world with?
When I was younger, like a teen, I used to want to leave the world with art and like creations and stuff like that. But now I basically want to leave behind things for the generations to come. I noticed that in my life, there was a lot of answers that I was seeking and a lot of things that I was looking for. And I'm literally creating a journal for the generations to come. For example, like old practices that, my bloodline used to do, Jamaicans. But even beyond that, just like notes of herbalisms. And I also want to leave behind a way of living to where not only like the younger or the generations to come that's related to me, but even other people's generations can benefit off of.
What's a lesson you've learned the hard way?
Ooh, the lesson I learned the hard way is to put myself first. Put myself first and to listen to that voice in my head all the time, no matter what situations look like or how I'm gonna be perceived. That was a huge one for me.
And the last one is, what are you most thankful for?
Oh man. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna always be forever thankful for my mind. Cause like it's right here, it's for free. And it's just like out of all the things that happens in my life, at least I'm sane, and at least like this thing in here, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it can manifest, it can attract, and it can guide me into the right direction.
Facts, facts. Well, thank you for being on my show. This was a great conversation. Thank you for all of the knowledge that you shared.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening. And we will soon be back with another episode. So stay tuned.
Yay! Thank you so much.